Back here at Crossfire Ministries for another one of our cooking demonstrations to show you how to use some of the food. Didn't you get all of this downstairs in the pantry?
Right.
So I'm Debbie.
I'm Linda.
And what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to use zucchini and yellow summer squash. And as you know, it's available in our pantry. It's available in the gardens in the summer. It's plentiful and it's relatively inexpensive. This is the zucchini we used. I can't show you the yellow summer squash because we only had enough that we've already cut and prepared. But what you're going to do is take your zucchini and your summer squash, and we washed it, Linda washed it real well with soap and water and rinsed it off, and we sliced it. And you can have slices or you can have the half moon, however you want it to look. And what we're going to do, what we did is we preheated our oven already, 350 degrees?
Yes.
Okay, and then Linda took 8x8 baking dish, and you used the cooking oil?
I used the cooking spray. It's an olive oil cooking spray.
And if they didn't have the cooking spray?
You could use any type of cooking spray. You could use butter or you could use margarine.
Perfect. Now what I'm going to do is read these recipes now, or the ingredients. Now the recipes are going to be downstairs in our winning recipe rack that we have in the pantry, so you can be on our winning team with us and cook nutritious, fresh, easy, inexpensive meals for your family. So we took 2 medium-sized zucchinis and 2 medium-sized summer squash, and what we're going to do is wash some basil. Our basil calls for 2 to 4 tablespoons of chopped fresh basil. And what you do is wash it off, put it in a spinner and spin it dry, or you can put it on paper towels and pat it dry. We didn't have fresh basil, so we're going to substitute 1 to 2 tablespoons of the dried basil. Now, taste it as you go along to make sure it's not too strong for you. And you're going to notice in this recipe, we made 3 substitutions, which is, you can do that in these recipes. If you don't have some of the ingredients, you can use what you have on hand. So 1 to 2 tablespoons of dried basil.
Okay, I think we'll just start out with 1.
Okay.
The conversion is 1 tablespoon of dried basil for 2 tablespoons of fresh basil.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to start out with 1.
Now the next thing that the recipe called for was 2 tablespoons of thinly sliced green onions. We didn't have green onions, but Linda's going to use chopped white onions.
You can always use any type of onions, no matter what your recipe calls for. If you don't have what it calls for, if it calls for green onions or red onions, you can use yellow or white.
Okay.
Whatever you might have on hand.
All right. Let me see what else it's calling for. So you've got the sliced squash, the basil, the onions. Now we need a half a teaspoon of dried thyme. We're going to be putting in some herbs in this recipe.
And when you're measuring, Debbie, you want to make sure it's a level tablespoon or teaspoon, not heaping.
Okay.
If it's going to be a heaping, it'll tell you, so you can mount it up really good.
Okay, so the recipe would call for heaping if they want. Okay, so after the dried thyme, it calls for 3/4 of a teaspoon of garlic powder.
Okay.
Now, garlic powder really is different than garlic salt. Would you substitute garlic salt for garlic powder if you needed to?
I would, but then I would take into consideration any other salt that is in the recipe, and I would reduce the amount of salt. Now, how much of this?
It calls for 3/4 teaspoon of garlic powder.
Okay. So that's a half and a quarter. Makes 3/4.
Okay. Now the next thing it calls for, the recipe calls for a cup of low-fat white cheese. We didn't have a whole cup of white cheese, so we've got a half a cup of our white cheese and a half a cup of the yellow cheese. So which one did you want to add the half a cup in first? It calls for adding a half a cup of the white cheese.
Okay, I'm going to use the half a cup of white cheese.
Okay.
Now, we used a nice Swiss. You can use any type of white cheese. You can use mozzarella, Swiss, just about any type of white cheese that you like.
And then it calls for half a cup of Parmesan.
Okay, here's a grated Parmesan.
Okay.
We're gonna add that.
And now it says to mix all the veggies with the cheese and the herbs until it's all well distributed.
Okay. You wanna make sure that you get some of this all over all of the slices.
So that's going to take maybe a little bit of stirring because there's not a whole lot of moisture on that zucchini I'm seeing.
Right. And there's less moisture right now because we sliced ours a little ahead of time.
Oh, that's right.
There'll be a little moisture if you do this yourself right when you're getting ready to cook.
Okay. All right. That's good.
But some people like to prepare their veggies and things ahead. So, okay, I think we've got that pretty well coated.
All right. Then what it says is seasoned with salt and fresh ground black pepper.
Okay, so I'm not going to add any more salt since we used the garlic salt.
Okay.
So then when we get ready to serve it, people can add more salt if they feel like it
Okay.
needs it. How much ground pepper?
The ground pepper, it just said to taste. Now it talks about fresh ground pepper. We didn't have fresh ground pepper, so we're just going to use regular pepper.
Okay.
And again, it's to taste.
So I think I'm going to use about 1/8 of a teaspoon of black pepper. And the same thing, you know, if you want a little more pepper on it when it's served, you can add your pepper.
So you would stir that again to mix that all in?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right, then what we're going to do is put that into the baking dish.
Okay.
And remember, you needed to coat that with a cooking oil or something ahead of time.
Oops.
Whoops.
Make sure you don't get it all over the floor.
We'll be like Julia Child.
We will. Okay. Want to make sure that you always wash your hands before you get started because in almost any recipe you're going to be using your fingers.
And tasting sometimes.
That's true.
Now,
That's the drawback. Okay.
all right, now what we're going to do is we're going to put this in the oven at 350 degrees that we already pre-cooked or preheated, and it's going to go in for about 25 minutes. After 25 minutes, what we're going to do is we're going to take it out of the oven, and we're going to take that other half a cup of the yellow cheese that we put aside, and we're going to sprinkle it over the top and stick it in the oven for about another 10 minutes, okay, until it's all bubbly and golden brown and melted. All right, so let's go put it in the oven, and then we'll be back with you when it's ready. All right, we're back with our easy cheesy zucchini bake. You can see we used our last half cup of yellow cheese, and we put it on top and melted it. So now what we're going to do is serve it up. This is our favorite part. And let's give it a try and see what we think. That cheese really makes it tasty. You guys like this? And it's got a chewy texture to it too. I think it's not too soft.
Right.
So, you know, we always end this when we like it, and when it's nutritious, we call ourselves what?
Winning team.